Hey everyone, it's Kelly here, and today I wanted to share with you a start to finish Lightroom editing tutorial. And I'm calling this my Late Summer Splendor. And the inspiration behind it is just sort of all of the beautiful, rich, bold color in my garden right now. We've had lots of rain lately, which has just done wonders for my garden in general, and especially my dahlias. I also love this time of year because the light is changing just a little bit. It's just, there's a softness to it and sort of just a beautiful golden hue to it. And so putting those two things together, I think it'll be really, really pretty. So to get started, the first thing that I want to do is come over here into the panels over here, and I want to come to lens corrections. I'm going to check these boxes, and it's automatically selected my Canon 100mm macro lens, which is what I use to shoot this image with. So I can go ahead and close that one. Next thing I'm going to do is come up to the crop tool. Anytime I shoot vertical images, I like the ratio of 8:10 the best, and so I'm going to just kind of play around here. You can see the line of my fence. I'm going to kind of use that as my rule of thirds, but I also want to straighten it a little bit, so I'm just going to grab one of these corner handles up here. I'm just going to tilt it so that the dark gray line of the fence is generally horizontal. I mean, I just don't think I could take a straight picture if my life depended on it, but I'm going to do the best I can, and I think something around there looks good. I'm going to hit enter on my keyboard to go ahead and accept that, and yeah, I think that's nice. Maybe I'll just come up a tiny bit more. Yeah, that's great. I'm happy with that. Alright, so the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here into this basic panel. And for now, I'm not going to adjust the exposure. I might come back to it if I need to, but I am going to boost the contrast. So like I said, my inspiration for this was just kind of like the bold, rich colors that are in my garden right now. And one of the ways to kind of boost that idea is by increasing the contrast. So I'm going to bump up my contrast quite a bit here, maybe somewhere around plus 20. If I use the backslash key on my keyboard, here's before and here's after. You can see it just adds like a really nice pop. And basically what contrast does is it makes lighter areas of the photo lighter and darker areas of the photo darker. So I mean, just having that gives it a really nice like boost in contrast. Alright, so I might pull back the highlights just a bit, because what that does is kind of adds in a little more tone up here where I have this sun flare, kind of adds a little more detail, a little more color back in that area. If I went all the way, this is what it would look like, but I think somewhere in here is totally fine. I'm going to leave the shadows, whites, and blacks alone for now. Like I said, I might come back to some of these depending on how the final edit comes out. Alright, so the next step I'm going to do is come into this clarity, this presence group with my clarity slider, and I'm going to bump that up just a little bit too. Actually, I think I'm going to bump it up about like I did the contrast. And clarity is similar to contrast, but what it does is it tries to find the places where light and dark meets and sort of emphasizes that it emphasizes the places where the light and the dark meet. So once again, it adds just a little more pop and a little more clarity to my image. Alright, so what I want to do is a little fun trick that I like to do sometimes with the vibrance and saturation. So I'm going to bump up saturation maybe somewhere around here. The difference between vibrance and saturation is that saturation increases the saturation of all of the colors in an image, the entire range of color, whereas vibrance, it only boosts some of the more subtle tones. So I've upped the vibrance, which will definitely give some pop here into these, kind of purple and magenta areas of my dahlia. But I'm also going to reduce the saturation. And I know I said that, this is all about late summer and rich color, but I think once you see when I get finished with some of the other enhancements that I'm going to do, it's going to turn out really awesome. So I think I'll start here for now. It just tones down some of the green and allows a little more of the purple to stand out. So just hang with me and we'll go through it, and then we can come back and adjust it if necessary. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is come into my tone curve, and I'm going to select the RGB tone curve, and this is where I like to play with the curve a little bit. You can add another sort of layer or dimension of contrast by clicking on points on this straight line here. So I think what I'm going to do is maybe select some points around in here, and then we'll come back and we'll play around with the overall look of it. And you can also hover over each of the points, and we'll smooth this out a little bit and give it a little more gentle type of curve. I don't want anything too dramatic. I've already bumped up my contrast quite a bit, so I'm not going to try to do anything too crazy and too dramatic here. But I do like to pull up this bottom left corner for that soft matte finish. And then maybe I'll pull this down here. Now see how much that boosted all of the tones in this area. So I might come here. So anything above the line, this is the straight line, anything above that we're going to lighten, and anything below it we're going to darken. So you can see I'm a little bit below the line here in my mid-tone, so that means my mid-tone areas are going to be a little bit darker than they were before. But the areas above the line are these shadowy areas, and so by lifting this bottom corner, that's what gives us sort of that soft matte finish. This might be just a bit more than I wanted to do, but like I said, we can always come back and play some more once we get through the entire process. And then maybe just bring this guy up just a little bit. I just want to have a nice smooth tone curve in this. Yeah, I think that'll work. So if I turn off the tone curve with this button right here, here it is before the tone curve, and here it is after. So once again, another big punch of rich contrast in my image. So that looks great. I'm going to, in this edit, I'm going to play around with the red channel, and what that does is we're going to affect the red and green tones. The opposite in the color spectrum in Lightroom from red is green. So similar to the RGB tone curve before, anything that we do to this curve, and if we change it above the line, is going to increase red. Anything we do below the line is going to decrease red. Okay, so I think what I would like to do, I want to add sort of maybe some russety colors into the greens, just add a little more of kind of that late summer vibe. So I'm going to, I think I'm going to click right about here, right about 2/3 of the way to the top right corner. And I'm just going to lift ever so slightly up on this to give me a little bit of a curve. And do you see what that's doing? It's adding a lot of richness here in this kind of lighter area, because this is going to be the lighter areas of a photo, but it's also adding just a little more of that kind of russet tone here into the green areas. I could also drop a little pin here and just increase it in these deeper tones as well. So once again, here it is before the tone curve adjustments and after. And I like sort of that that kind of brownish russety color, because to me that sort of feels like heading into fall, kind of taking on that vibe. So I like that. I think I'll leave that there for now. The next thing I'm going to do is come into the split toning panel, and in the highlights what I would like to do is sort of emphasize this golden light area up here in the upper right hand corner of my photo. So to do that, I'm going to select a tone maybe in this kind of peachy golden area. I'm going to keep it fairly subtle, but maybe just emphasize that peachy tone maybe around here somewhere. Yeah, that'll be great. And then in the shadows, I'm going to play with this a little bit as well. I'm going to select a shade that is kind of in the red. So you've seen me do things in the blues before, sort of that vintage kind of thing. But this time I think that I'm going to play around here in this red area, and I'm going to select something kind of right around here. I'm going to keep it fairly subtle because I don't want to overdo it. But then in the darker areas of the photo, it's just going to add this little bit of kind of a deep, kind of dusty, mauvey, rosy sort of peach color. Alright, so here's before split toning and here's after. And do you see kind of where it's added a little bit more of that that kind of burnished russet color in the leaves, but then emphasize the golden tones of the sun coming in. So that's really nice. So if I hit the backslash key on my keyboard, here's before and here's after. And I really like how that is. It's just got like a really rich, warm tone to it. Alright, so the next thing is the detail panel, and I always sharpen my digital images. They always need a bit of sharpening, so I usually pull my sharpening slider towards the right, maybe not all the way. And then what I like to do is hold down my Alt key or Option key and click on the masking slider. And what that does is it just masks off some of the sharpening so that I'm only sharpening the outside edges of the flower, and that gives it a really nice clear, sharp appearance. Just kind of sharpens that up a little bit. That's great. Alright, so the last thing that I'm going to do here in these adjustment panels is I'm going to come over to Effects, and I'm going to give my image a little bit of a vignette. So before I actually pull this slider, what I want to do, well, let me pull it back a little bit. Also, what I want to do here is I want to play with the midpoint and the roundness. So to do that, I'm going to completely unfeather my vignette just so that you can see where the vignette is being applied. Now, obviously, I'm not going to leave it like this, but I'm going to adjust the slider a little bit because I want to pull it in so that just kind of this main part of my image is left untouched by the vignette. And then I'm going to play with the roundness a little bit and give it a little bit more of a round, soft feel. Now, when I come back and I feather this out, you can't see that hard line. So I'm going to feather it out, and then that's going to give that some nice depth here in the shadows. It really brings your attention into the lighter area, or this center part of my photo. Okay, I really like that a lot. Here's the before, and here's after. Yes, I really love that kind of rich warmth. Okay, so one last thing that I'm going to do, I took this photo in the morning. We had such a pretty like dappled light coming through. I really want to emphasize how that was landing on my photos. So I'm going to come over to the radial filter, and I'm going to drag sort of elliptical shape into this kind of upper right part of my photograph. And I can grab these handles and make it wider or more narrow. And then if I come down here, I can also turn it or rotate it a little bit to give it the direction that I want. So I might come back here. What this is going to do is it's going to add a little bit of light inside of this radial area, and by adjusting these I can tell it basically where I want this light to be, which is right here on this main flower. So I have my exposure set to 0.4. I'll see how that looks after the fact, but also what I'm going to do is, once again, trying to emphasize that beautiful warm golden light that was coming in the morning. So I'm going to add just a little bit of a pretty kind of golden color to that highlight area. I'm going to keep it fairly subtle. And then if I say done here, now you can see it's sort of brightened up. Let's see, I think we have to invert that actually. Yes, I need to invert it so that the lightning is on the inside. All right, that's better. Oh, hello. Where am I? Here we go. Back to the develop module. All right, so here we go. Now you can see where it's added just a little more light right here on top of this beautiful little flower. So I'm going to say done. Yeah, do you see how that's just lightened up this region just a little bit? Once again, here's before and here's after. Yeah, so with this edit, what I've done is I have added a lot of contrast. I've added some warm tones in the shadows and the highlights, and it's created just these really beautiful, rich colors, and just emphasize that beautiful late summer light that I love so much. So thank you so much for joining me. If you have any questions at all, be sure to leave them in the comments. I'm always happy to help. Lightroom is such a fun way to just bring another aspect of creativity to my photography, and I always appreciate you watching and letting me share it with you. So thank you so much for joining me.